Listen closely, and imagine me as a somewhat older soul who has spent many years wrestling with questions of right and wrong. Picture a modest study, its walls lined with classics of ancient philosophy, volumes by Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and a few other gems that echo their spirit. In that hush of centuries-old wisdom, we embark on a journey titled Upholding Integrity, Stoicism's Guide to Modern Moral Dilemmas. The premise is bold. In an era where ethical gray zones abound, whether involving business, relationships, or public life, the Stoics offer a surprisingly fresh template for preserving your moral center. Their approach is not about rigid dogmatism, but about forging a resilience that allows you to act ethically even under pressure or temptation. Now, if you are new here, please like the video and subscribe. Statistics show that only 15% of my audience is subscribed to the channel, so if this content has helped you in any way, I ask you to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Let me start with a simple but piercing question. What if you had a method to remain steadfast to your values, no matter how luring the bribe, how fierce the backlash, or how convenient the lie might seem? Imagine facing moral forks in the road, maybe a chance to profit from a shady deal, or a push from a boss to skirt regulations, and never faltering in your integrity because you've cultivated an unshakable foundation. That's the promise Stoicism can deliver. Yes, it's an ancient school of thought, formed in times we might see as simpler. But if you examine Roman politics or the threats that philosophers like Seneca or Epictetus endured, exile, conspiracies, corruption, they faced moral dilemmas quite as stark as ours. They discovered that integrity is not some lofty ideal for saints or moralists alone, but a practical anchor that can weather the storms of real life. We live in an age rife with confusion. Digital misinformation, corporate pressures, interpersonal betrayals. Many feel forced to compromise their values to get by. Yet the Stoics taught that while externals, money, status, reputation, carry significance, they pale beside the question of moral conscience. For them, the real measure of a life well lived is whether you can gaze upon your decisions, especially in the realm of ethics, without shame. They saw that no external success can compensate if you've violated your own moral code. That might sound austere, but in practice, it leads to a liberating sense that you can't truly be corrupted by outside circumstances. Even if the world around you roils with unethical demands, you remain free to choose virtue, costly though it might be. Why should you care about these teachings in modern contexts? Because, as I hinted, our dilemmas run rampant. Suppose you discover unethical practices in your workplace and fear that speaking out will destroy your livelihood. Or you must decide whether to overlook a small wrongdoing by a friend or relative to keep the peace. Or you suspect your partner is not being wholly transparent with finances, and you wonder if challenging them might threaten the relationship. The Stoic approach to upholding integrity addresses how to weigh these moral quandaries. It insists you define your core principles first: honesty, fairness, courage, compassion, and that no fleeting fear or short-term advantage is worth trading them away. By situating your identity in moral conviction, you discover you can endure the consequences of acting rightly. That's the Stoic stance. Adversity might follow an honest choice, but it's infinitely preferable to living enslaved by guilt or illusions. You might wonder if this is all too rigid for our fluid times. Stoics do not encourage reckless moral purism that ignores practical considerations. Rather, They balance acceptance of external factors with the unwavering sense that moral lines shouldn't be crossed. If forced to comply with an immoral act or lose your job, the Stoic logic might well lead you to walk away. Some would say that's naive, but Stoicism sees it differently. Better to rebuild or face hardship with a clear conscience than to remain in comfort that poisons your integrity. Let me show you how we'll unravel these ideas. 1. In Part 1, this segment, we'll delve into how Stoic philosophy frames integrity as the highest good, overshadowing wealth, power, or fleeting convenience. I'll share how figures like Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus navigated moral storms in times arguably more brutal than ours. We'll see that, for them, the real tragedy was losing your moral self, not losing your possessions or social standing. 2. In Part 2, we'll examine specific illusions that compromise moral action, like illusions of necessity. I have no choice but to cheat for survival. Or illusions of total control. I can manipulate outcomes so nobody sees my wrongdoing. We'll highlight how Stoic clarity unmasks these illusions, enabling you to choose honesty or courage even when the environment pressures otherwise. We'll also explore how Stoic teachings on negative visualization help you face the potential consequences of ethical stances, thus fortifying your resolve. 3. In Part 3, we'll weave these threads into a cohesive daily routine. You'll discover how to practice short reflections each morning or evening, mentally rehearsing moral dilemmas so they don't blindside you. We'll also see how a Stoic approach to adversity fosters compassion for others who might be cornered into moral compromise. And, crucially, we'll discuss how, if you do slip or betray your standards, you can use Stoic reflection to learn without crippling guilt, returning to the path of integrity with renewed commitment. As we proceed, let me anchor these lessons in personal anecdotes and historical references to Stoic figures. Because Stoicism isn't a set of hollow rules, it's a living discipline. The ancient Stoics themselves faced moral tests daily. Some were highborn, dealing with the treachery of imperial courts, while others, like Epictetus, came from slavery, forced to preserve dignity amid oppression. Each discovered that moral alignment was the bedrock of a free spirit. In our modern moral dilemmas, where injustice or temptation might appear more subtle but no less pervasive, we can glean from their logic. Let me open with a memory from my early career that awakened me to Stoic ethics. Years ago, I worked in a setting that demanded rigorous compliance with certain codes. One day, I noticed a senior colleague skirting those codes for personal gain. It felt minor at first, some fudging of expense reports, a bit of nepotism in awarding a contract. But as I dug deeper, I realized the practice was widespread, considered standard practice. My illusions told me, you can't challenge this, you'll lose your position or gain enemies. I hesitated, wrestling with guilt. Then I recalled Stoic lines about how no external advantage justifies betraying one's moral compass. If I condoned or abetted this wrongdoing, I was complicit. The cost of speaking up, or even refusing to partake, could be high. I might be sidelined, ridiculed, or forced out. But the Stoic stance, which I'd begun studying, pressed me to weigh that cost against a compromised conscience. Ultimately, I chose to address the issue with a mentor in the organization who shared my concerns. We confronted the matter. Indeed, it led to friction, but it also prompted some overdue reforms. Even if I had been pushed out, Stoicism taught me that no outward success can compensate for the inward rot of betrayal. That early stand shaped how I view moral dilemmas. Stoicism is about ensuring you can meet your own eyes in the mirror each morning, not about living free of friction. And, ironically, that friction often leads to growth or respect in unexpected corners. So, in approaching Upholding Integrity, Stoicism's Guide to Modern Moral Dilemmas, we start with the Stoic principle that the only true good is virtue, living in harmony with reason and justice. For them, everything else, wealth, reputation, comfort, is indifferent, in the sense that it's neither inherently good nor evil. It can be used well or poorly. Moral compromise, on the other hand, is an unqualified harm to your soul. The Stoics believed that once you yield to wrongdoing or complicity, you can't fully undo the internal damage. You might rectify the external mess, but the memory of that betrayal lingers. On the flip side, if you stand for integrity, even if it costs you job security or social acceptance, your spirit remains intact, able to find peace and self-respect. Let me expand on the tension between Stoic moral clarity and worldly ambition. Many worry that if they follow Stoic integrity, they'll lose professional opportunities or hamper their social capital. Indeed, Seneca wrestled with that tension at Nero's court, occasionally criticized for not severing ties with a notoriously corrupt regime. But the principle stands that while Stoics can engage in worldly pursuits, they never cross certain lines. In modern settings, you might still climb a corporate ladder, but you refuse to lie or sabotage colleagues for advancement. If that stance stalls your ascent, Stoicism helps you accept it as a lesser harm than defiling your character. Paradoxically, many find that even if Stoic moral fidelity leads to short-term setbacks, it fosters a long-term trust and authenticity that surpass illusions of immediate success. Now, to illustrate how Stoics see moral dilemmas, let me share an example from ancient times. Cato the Younger. He opposed Julius Caesar's power grabs and refused to compromise, even when it meant stepping away from potential alliances that could have preserved his status. Ultimately, when Caesar triumphed, Cato chose to end his life rather than live under a regime he deemed tyrannical, famously reading philosophical treatises before taking that final step. Though we might question the extremity of his choice, the example underscores the Stoic conviction that moral principle stands above worldly gain. In our modern realm, that might translate to resigning from a company that engages in unethical practices, or speaking truth to a friend, even if it bruises the friendship. You need not adopt Cato's lethal finality, of course, but the symbolic message remains. Stoic integrity can require bold stands that defy short-term advantage. You might ask, how do I handle the regrets or guilt if I do compromise, or if my stand leads to real harm? Stoicism's approach is twofold. First, it says, no matter how gravely you've stumbled, you can always reassert integrity now. The past can guide you but not chain you. Epictetus taught that each morning we awaken free to choose virtue, unshackled by prior mistakes if we correct them. Second, if your ethical stand leads to adversity, Stoics reframe adversity as a test that reveals your moral fiber. They never claimed it'd be easy, but they did believe it nurtures an unbreakable sense of self-worth. By letting a single day's adversity or loss overshadow your moral stance, you degrade your mind with illusions that comfort or security outrank principle. Stoics invert that hierarchy. Principle outranks ephemeral comfort. At this juncture, let me show how negative visualization, the technique from prepare for the worst, merges with moral dilemmas. Suppose you anticipate being asked to do something shady at work. You can visualize the scenario. Your superior requests you fudge data or exploit a loophole. You imagine your refusal, the possible fallout. Maybe you're sidelined, your career growth stalls. Maybe you even lose your position. By rehearsing it in your mind, you see the cost you might pay for your integrity, and you accept that cost before it arises. This acceptance strips away the terror that I can't survive if I refuse. You realize you can adapt, find new work, or scale down your lifestyle. Freed from illusions that your current job is absolutely irreplaceable, you stand firm. If the scenario truly unfolds, you respond as planned, unwavering. If it never arises, you remain grateful, but continue anchoring your moral code in Stoic principles. Either way, illusions about necessity or guaranteed success no longer run your life. Let me emphasize a key Stoic insight about moral clarity. It's not about imposing your standards on everyone else or being self-righteous. Stoics counsel focusing on your own virtue, not policing the entire world. That means if your environment is corrupt, you might speak truth, or if that fails, detach yourself. You don't try to forcibly convert all around you to Stoic ethics, unless you occupy a leadership role that demands policy changes. But you maintain your personal line in the sand. In modern times, this might mean leaving a friend group that habitually engages in destructive behaviors, or refusing to enable a partner's unethical hustle, or quietly stepping away from social media drama that tempts you to stoop to insults. The Stoic stance aims at preserving your moral equilibrium, rather than controlling others. Indeed, the Stoics recognized that each person's moral journey must be chosen, not coerced. Freed from illusions about controlling everyone else's behavior, you concentrate on living your principles consistently. Perhaps you wonder how such unwavering morality can function in a competitive environment. Indeed, Stoics see competition as an external game that can be played ethically or unethically. If your rival cheats, you can respond with Stoic cunning, but not by stooping to cheat in return. That might cost you the win, but Stoics say a tarnished victory is no real victory at all. They recall the story of a great athlete who refused to sabotage a competitor, even though it meant losing. The Stoic viewpoint is that ephemeral trophies pale beside the abiding sense that you remained true to virtue. Paradoxically, over the long run, many Stoics found that moral consistency attracted genuine respect and alliances, overshadowing short-term losses. But even if it didn't, the Stoics' serenity came from within, not from external applause. Now, let me share a contemporary anecdote. I knew an individual who discovered that her startup's marketing plan involved deceptive claims about the product's capabilities. She wrestled with illusions. Maybe it's not so unethical, or we can't survive in the market if we're honest. She recognized the Stoic principle that if you compromise your authenticity once, you open the door to deeper moral decay. So she overcame illusions of "we have no choice" and confronted the team. They were split. Some insisted they'd fail if they told the truth. Others were open to a more transparent approach. She stood firm, prepared to walk away if the deception continued. Ultimately, the startup pivoted to honest marketing, though it faced a tough road. Yet her moral stance remained intact, and ironically, that authenticity built a loyal customer base over time. That's how Stoic integrity can yield intangible benefits, even if it looks risky at first glance. Let's bring in the anchor concept. Stoics see moral dilemmas not as tangential threats to your comfort, but as opportunities to forge your character more fully. Each choice that upholds virtue, even at personal cost, deepens your sense of who you are. Each moral compromise, even a small one, chips away at that sense. Over time, you either accumulate a robust moral identity or become haunted by self-betrayals. Stoicism says the latter is too steep a price for any external reward. Epictetus taught that the highest freedom is the freedom to act rightly without fear. Modern moral dilemmas, from small everyday choices, like shading the truth, to major ethical stands, like whistleblowing on wrongdoing, test that freedom. If you cling to illusions that you can't sacrifice external advantages, you cave in. If you adopt Stoic acceptance, I can endure the cost of truth, you emerge with an unbreakable spirit. That unbreakable spirit doesn't imply you roam the world picking fights over every minor slight. Stoicism calls for wise discernment. Some moral lines are unequivocal, like not intentionally harming the innocent. Others might be nuanced. Perhaps you see a colleague do something borderline unethical, but you weigh the context. Is it your place to correct them, or do you gather more info first? The Stoic approach is measured, not impulsive. You don't cry foul at every gray area, but you do remain alert to your moral boundaries. If they're truly threatened, you either address the issue or, failing that, remove yourself. Because Stoics trust that living without illusions means acknowledging that you can't single-handedly cleanse the world of injustice, but you can keep injustice from ruling you. Let me detail how illusions about necessity corrode moral stances. Often, someone justifies wrongdoing with, "I had no choice." The Stoics retort, "You always have a choice in how you respond." Certainly, you might face dire consequences, losing a job or a friend, but that doesn't equate to zero choice. Stoicism demystifies the illusions that hold us captive. For instance, "I had to lie or else I'd lose favor." Stoics say, yes, losing favor is a real possibility, but your integrity remains yours to preserve, and that is a far greater good than fleeting approval. By dispelling illusions that external acceptance is more vital than moral truth, Stoicism fosters steadfastness. Sure, you might be penalized, but Stoics see moral compromise as a deeper self-inflicted wound. Now, to tie back to negative visualization, if you suspect you may face a moral dilemma soon, like your boss might push you to falsify a report, use Stoic negative visualization. Conjure that scenario. Your boss requests a tweak in numbers that isn't accurate. You calmly see yourself refusing or politely clarifying that it's unethical. Imagine the outcome. Your boss might retaliate, scold you, hamper your promotion, or even let you go. Then, see yourself coping with that adversity. Maybe searching for another role, or adjusting your finances. Notice that while painful, it's survivable. Freed from illusions that you can't endure it, you choose integrity if that day comes. If it never does, you haven't lost anything. If it does, you meet it as you rehearsed. I prefer to keep my job, but not at the expense of honesty. That clarifies your moral line. No illusions of, "I can never be fired." No illusions of, "I must do whatever's asked." Just calm acceptance that you might pay a price for your stance, but Stoic virtues overshadow that price. As we near the close of Part 1, let me underscore the unwavering Stoic stance. Moral integrity stands as the supreme good. Everything else, comfort, advancement, external praise, bows to that. By embracing negative visualization for moral dilemmas, you mentally preempt illusions that might coax you to compromise. By releasing illusions of total control or necessity, you see how you can adapt, even if doing the right thing costs you. The upshot is a life anchored in authenticity, recognized by a quiet self-respect that no external stroke of fortune can grant or revoke. It's from this vantage we'll delve deeper in Part 2 into illusions that sabotage moral clarity and how Stoics systematically dismantle them, letting them face modern moral dilemmas with an unwavering sense of identity. Let's move forward. Let us now delve into the realm of illusions, the mental cobwebs that so easily ensnare our resolve and corrode our moral backbone. Part 1 laid out the Stoic principle that integrity is paramount, overshadowing all externals like wealth, prestige, or fleeting convenience. It also introduced the practice of negative visualization as a means to mentally prepare for the costs of doing the right thing. Now, in Part 2, I want to highlight the illusions that often sabotage our efforts to uphold integrity and show how Stoic teachings systematically uproot those illusions, paving the way for a more unwavering stance in the face of modern moral dilemmas. Let me begin with a personal recollection that might strike a chord. Many years ago, I was in a position where speaking out about a small ethical violation could threaten my fragile reputation in a new job. The violation seemed trivial, slightly bending a rule to expedite a certain process, but it nagged at me because I sensed this small bend was symptomatic of a culture that encouraged bigger bends. Yet illusions pinned me down. Chief among them was the illusion of necessity. I can't afford to displease my new colleagues. I have no choice but to go along. The more I told myself I had no choice, the more entrapped I felt. It was only by unmasking that illusion, realizing there's always a moral choice, though the cost may be high, that I found the nerve to politely question the practice. That eventually drew some scorn, but it set a precedent that I wouldn't compromise my ethics. Over time, my colleagues came to respect my consistency, though the initial backlash stung. That moment taught me that illusions of "I must do this" or "I have no choice" are often self-imposed shackles that keep us from living authentically. Stoics recognized that illusions cloud our vision primarily in two ways. First, by exaggerating the threat of losing externals, and second, by minimizing the moral consequences of small compromises. Let us examine each type of illusion separately, then connect them to the Stoic method of releasing illusions, especially through negative visualization and acceptance of partial control. 1. Exaggerating the threat of losing externals. We often believe that if we lose a job, a partner, a reputation, or a certain measure of comfort, our entire well-being disintegrates. This fear fosters moral compromise. For example, an employee might remain silent about a fraudulent practice because he believes being fired is unthinkable, or a politician might ignore a bribe if refusing it means losing vital campaign support. Stoics call such illusions immoderate attachments, the idea that we can't bear to part with certain externals. Ironically, by believing we can't survive losing them, we become ripe for moral manipulation. How do Stoics break this illusion? Through negative visualization, yes, but also by training themselves to identify what truly belongs to them, namely their capacity to judge, choose, and uphold virtue. If you practice imagining unemployment or social ostracism, you discover it's survivable. Maybe you'd tighten your budget, or develop new skills, or rely on supportive networks. That perspective kills the illusion that losing a single external is the end of the world. You realize, I much prefer to keep this job, or reputation, but I won't sacrifice my moral center to do so, because even if I lose it, my integrity remains intact, and with that, I can rebuild. Freed from the illusion that your entire worth resides in that external possession, you can be more forthright, less prone to ethical slippage. A classic Stoic example. Cato the Younger was offered multiple chances to align with Julius Caesar's power moves, which could have earned him lavish positions and public favor. But illusions of, "I can't afford to oppose Caesar," never swayed him. He recognized that while Caesar could strip him of wealth or comfort, Caesar couldn't force him to compromise his internal code. Consequently, Cato paid a high external price, but Stoics celebrate him as a model of moral steadfastness. In modern parallels, refusing illusions might mean a whistleblower stands firm, even if it ends their career in a particular company. The acceptance that external success is fleeting grants them the moral fortitude to act rightly. Let me highlight a practical example. If you fear confronting a supervisor about something unethical, Stoic reflection helps you weigh that, yes, confrontation might prompt retaliation, but you'd remain capable of finding new employment or adjusting your lifestyle if needed. Meanwhile, if you acquiesce, you gnaw at your conscience, sowing seeds of shame. The Stoic sees that illusions about, "I must keep this job no matter what," are chains that keep you from moral clarity. By dissolving them, you tap into a deeper reservoir of courage. That doesn't guarantee a happy ending in external terms, but it preserves your integrity, which Stoics deem the ultimate victory. 2. Minimizing the moral consequences of small compromises. Another common illusion is the belief that tiny lapses in integrity don't matter. Perhaps you rationalize, "It's just a little fib. No one's really hurt. Everybody else does it, so it's not a big deal." Over time, such illusions form a slippery slope, normalizing a pattern of ethical decay. Stoicism warns that any willful breach of virtue stains your character, breeding internal conflict. Even if the breach remains invisible to others, it fosters self-doubt and erodes your capacity to stand firm later when bigger moral issues arise. Stoics propose a practice of consistent self-examination. Each day's minor actions, like small deceptions, rude behaviors, or corners cut, are not trivial. They reflect your deeper moral stance. If you lie casually in one domain, you prime yourself to do so again in more critical domains. Epictetus insisted that integrity is forged by repeated adherence to virtue in small decisions, so that when a major dilemma emerges, you already have the habit of honesty or courage. By contrast, illusions that this small compromise is harmless degrade your moral reflex, leaving you vulnerable to bigger lapses. As a personal anecdote, I recall a friend who used to pad expense reports by minor amounts. He'd shrug. Everyone inflates mileage a bit. But when later a more significant fraud was demanded by his employer, fabricating data to secure a contract, he found it harder to refuse. He'd grown accustomed to tiny dishonesties, weaving illusions that this is just how business works. When he finally realized the gravity of the bigger fraud, it was too late. He'd internalized the notion that moral corners exist to be cut. Stoic reflection helps you see every moral choice as part of a larger pattern shaping your character. Hence, illusions that trivialize small wrongs must be dismantled before they develop into bigger wrongdoing. Unraveling illusions with Stoic tools. We've identified illusions that cause moral compromise, exaggerating the horror of losing externals or minimizing the impact of small, unethical acts. Now, How does Stoicism unravel them in practice? 1. Negative visualization on consequences. The Stoics teach you to imagine the outcome of resisting moral compromise. Maybe you lose a promotion or face someone's anger. By mentally rehearsing that adversity, you realize you can endure it. This counters illusions that adversity is unendurable. Conversely, you can imagine the spiritual toll of giving in, living with guilt, wondering if you're just a pawn of convenience. That image might disturb you enough to prefer the honest path. So, negative visualization acts both ways, showing you how you can survive external loss and how moral betrayal yields internal damage that's harder to rectify. 2. Daily moral check-ins. Just as Stoics advise reviewing the day's events for small moral slips, illusions can be spotted in real time. If you sense yourself about to say, "I have no choice," or "it's just a minor lie," pause. Recognize this as a pattern of illusions. Ask, "Do I truly have no choice? Or am I fearing external consequences too greatly? Is this small lie truly harmless, or does it chip away at my moral stance?" This self-dialogue brings illusions to the surface, letting you replace them with Stoic clarity. Over time, you refine your ability to catch illusions before they lead you astray. 3. Anchoring in core values. Another method is to define your moral lines explicitly. For instance, vow never to lie or cheat in your professional dealings, or to remain loyal to your partner. Each time illusions tempt you, you recall that vow. The Stoic approach is unwavering. Even if it's inconvenient, I will not cross this line. Of course, illusions might say, but this is a special exception. Stoic rationality says, name the exception. Is it truly about survival, or is it mere comfort? If it's just comfort or convenience, it doesn't outweigh my moral vow. By naming your moral lines in calmer moments, you immunize yourself against illusions that arise in the heat of a situation. 4. Partial influence, not total control. Stoics emphasize that you can attempt to shape events ethically, but never ensure victory. Accepting that truth fosters a sense of serenity about outcomes. If illusions drive you to believe your moral action must always succeed externally, you might waver when success seems unlikely. But Stoic acceptance says moral action stands on its own, success or not. This logic also helps dismantle illusions that you can keep everything perfect if you simply compromise. Reality might override your compromise anyway, leaving you with neither success nor integrity. By acknowledging partial influence, you remain focused on what truly belongs to you, your ethical stance. Should external success or survival follow, that's welcome, but never purchased with your core virtue. Let me illustrate with a story combining these tools. A manager realized her company was about to launch a misleading advertising campaign. She considered illusions that perhaps she had no choice. Losing this job seemed catastrophic. She performed negative visualization, picturing life post-firing, maybe living on savings for a bit, scouring for new roles, a bruise to her pride, but ultimately it was survivable. She also recognized that labeling the ad campaign as not so bad was an illusion, since it purposely deceived customers. She asked herself, if I sign off on this, do I become a silent accomplice? She concluded yes. By acknowledging she didn't control the company's fate, but did control her own stance, she mustered the courage to voice her concerns. The company brushed her aside. She resigned with dignity, stepping away from illusions that she could keep her moral code while passively enabling a lie. Freed from illusions about guaranteed security, she found a new role elsewhere after some weeks of searching. Through Stoic clarity, she preserved her integrity, gained the respect of a few co-workers who quietly admired her stand, and discovered she was never as trapped as illusions suggested. The role of compassion in upholding integrity. People sometimes think that Stoicism is harsh or aloof, but the Stoics recognized that we are social beings. Part of moral dilemmas often involves other people's well-being or errors. Stoic ethics encourages compassion for those who compromise themselves due to illusions or fear. Rather than adopting a holier-than-thou posture, Stoics see that illusions can entrap anyone. So, if your colleague is cutting corners, you might gently reason with them. Show them how illusions lead to deeper trouble. If they refuse to budge, Stoicism says you remain steadfast yourself, but not with scorn or hatred. You simply can't let illusions rule your own conduct. In a modern office, that might look like calmly explaining to a coworker why you won't manipulate data, acknowledging their fear of the boss's reaction but standing firm on your line. If they're open, they might reevaluate their illusions. If not, you hold your ground, unresentful but resolved. Now, some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey, and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write better every day, so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. Indeed, Stoics anchor a sense of empathy for those who yield to illusions. Marcus Aurelius often wrote, "When encountering wrongdoing, ask yourself what illusions or ignorance might cause it. That question spares you the bitterness of condemnation. Instead, you see illusions of necessity or greed might have led them astray. Meanwhile, you keep your own path. This blend of empathy and moral firmness is crucial. You neither condemn the world nor join it in wrongdoing. Instead, you move with clarity, sometimes creating small ripples of change by example." Seneca once observed that a single man living by virtue can subtly influence those around him. Like a healthy part of the body can sometimes help a diseased portion recover, if they're willing to see the example. Moral dilemmas in personal relationships. So far, we've given many workplace or public examples, but illusions also thrive in personal realms, like friendships or family ties. Perhaps you discover a sibling engaged in self-destructive behavior or borderline unethical habits, and illusions might say, "I should keep quiet, or I'll lose their love." Yet Stoic logic sees that enabling wrongdoing or ignoring it to keep the peace is a form of moral complicity. You might, with compassion, approach them, gently stating truths they need to hear. If illusions tell you, "This conversation will ruin our bond," Stoic negative visualization ensures you can face that possibility of strain or even estrangement. You prefer not to lose closeness, but you won't let illusions hamper you from acting out of genuine care or moral necessity. If the relationship is tested, Stoicism helps you handle that heartbreak, knowing you upheld sincerity rather than illusions of forced harmony. Similarly, illusions can distort romantic relationships, like believing you can forcibly keep a partner from drifting by ignoring red flags, or that you can never question suspicious behaviors because illusions whisper, "You'll drive them away." Stoics remind us, love thrives on honesty, and illusions about controlling someone's heart only sow deeper conflict. If a partner truly chooses to leave, no illusions can cage them. A Stoic might say, "Yes, I'll do my best to nurture trust and open communication, but I can't guarantee permanence." Freed from illusions, you invest wholeheartedly, cherishing each moment of closeness, while accepting that relationships can evolve or end. That acceptance ironically fosters a healthier bond, because you're not strangling the connection with controlling tactics. And if it does end, you lean on Stoic reflection to grieve, but not annihilate your sense of self. Handling consequences. If you uphold integrity, we must consider that Stoic integrity can indeed bring real consequences: loss of a job, the end of certain friendships, lowered status in a certain community. How do you endure such outcomes without regret or bitterness? Stoicism's answer: you do so by reminding yourself that illusions are what cause regret or bitterness. Like illusions that you deserved a comfortable job, or that true friends would never desert you. Stoic acceptance says, "This is the cost of my moral stance. I anticipated it. I remain confident that no external penalty can outweigh the internal satisfaction of living by my values." That's not to say you won't feel sorrow if a friend parts ways or if your finances tighten, but you won't become morally undone by it. Instead, you see it as a burden you bear for the greater good of your conscience. Consider a whistleblower who truly loses her position and struggles financially for a time. Stoicism helps her navigate the aftermath by recalling she never truly controlled the outcome, only her choice. She can find solace in the knowledge that at least her soul is not compromised. Epictetus taught that if you consistently prioritize virtue over ephemeral gains, you might face external hardships, but your soul remains free. That freedom, once tasted, becomes a prized possession. You realize illusions were the chains that made external loss appear so catastrophic. Without those illusions, you feel the pain, but keep your identity unbroken. Practical steps to build moral fortitude. Let me outline how you can cultivate Stoic readiness for moral dilemmas, step by step. 1. Articulate your moral lines. Identify non-negotiables, like honesty in professional dealings, fidelity in relationships, refusal to harm innocents. This clarity ensures illusions can't push you into tiny exceptions. 2. Negative visualization on ethical consequences. Reflect on potential moral conflicts, like a boss demanding unethical actions. Mentally see yourself refusing. Sense the fallout. Accept it's survivable. That acceptance preempts illusions of, "I can't afford to do what's right." 3. Beware of tiny compromises. In day-to-day life, keep watch for illusions. It's just a small lie. It's just a small bribe. Stop them before they normalize bigger transgressions. Recognize each act shapes your moral reflex. 4th, revisit the dichotomy of control. Reassert that you don't command external outcomes. Failing to comply might lead to losing an opportunity. But you do command your moral stance, which Stoics uphold as your real fortress. 5. Compassionate stance toward others. If colleagues or friends compromise ethically, let Stoic empathy guide how you address them, firm but understanding of their illusions. If they persist, you calmly protect your stance, possibly parting ways if needed. 6th evening, self-check. At night, review the day's moral choices. Did illusions sway you into a small lie or passivity against wrongdoing? If so, correct it going forward. If you stood firm, note how illusions lost their grip on you that day. rejoice in that minor triumph. Over time, these steps form an ongoing discipline of moral vigilance. You learn to spot illusions of total necessity or trivial harm, handle them with Stoic clarity, and build a consistent track record of integrity. We've now examined illusions that sabotage moral clarity and how Stoic logic dismantles them. But how do we incorporate these insights systematically into our everyday routine, from the moment we wake to the moment we face real crises? That's the task of Part 3. We'll craft a cohesive practice: morning reflection, midday resilience checks, evening reviews, so that Stoic integrity doesn't remain theoretical. We'll see how you can approach small moral dilemmas, like borderline gossip or cutting corners, and large moral challenges, like standing against a powerful figure, with the same Stoic composure. By the end, you'll wield a fully fleshed-out method for upholding integrity day after day, forging the habit of moral fortitude that so many yearn for but seldom achieve. For now, let the notion settle that illusions undermine integrity by exaggerating external threats or trivializing small ethical lapses. Stoicism battles those illusions head-on, urging you to embrace potential adversity through negative visualization and anchoring your self-worth in virtue, not ephemeral gains. That combination yields the moral courage to face modern dilemmas without flinching. We proceed then to Part 3, where these concepts transform into a daily Stoic ethic, one that can carry you through office politics, personal struggles, and uncertain times with unwavering clarity. We arrive now at the final stretch of our exploration, having already established the fundamental Stoic insight that moral integrity stands above all worldly considerations, and having examined the illusions that commonly seduce us into compromising our principles. If Part 1 introduced the Stoic priority of virtue over fleeting success, and Part 2 dissected the specific illusions, such as "I have no choice" or "it's just a small compromise," then this concluding portion focuses on how to internalize these teachings in a daily, practical way. We will craft a cohesive regimen or lifestyle blueprint, ensuring that Stoic moral clarity doesn't remain a distant ideal, but rather becomes the beating heart of your routine. From the moment you wake to the decisions that shape your day, and into the evenings when you reflect upon your actions, Stoicism can guide you in upholding integrity amid modern moral dilemmas. Let us open with a vivid story that reveals how these principles might unify in actual life. Picture a busy professional named Eleanor, mid-level manager at a firm known for pushing boundaries in its marketing strategies. Each morning, she battles the usual swirl of tasks and announcements, but behind that swirl lurk murky ethical lines the firm often crosses. Eleanor has, in her quieter moments, discovered the Stoic approach. She's begun practicing negative visualization and, in Part 2 terms, has recognized illusions that used to paralyze her. For instance, she used to think, "I can't risk losing my job. I have no choice but to approve these misleading ads." Now, thanks to Stoic reflection, she sees that she does have a choice. Yes, refusing might cost her a promotion or spark conflicts, but it wouldn't be the end of her life's meaning. And letting illusions lead her to compromise daily has, ironically, been corroding her sense of self-worth. A week ago, she underwent a minor moral test. Her boss asked her to sign off on an ad claim that was, at best, half-truthful. Eleanor paused, recalling her newly cultivated Stoic vantage. She did a brief negative visualization, imagining her boss's anger or her department shunning her, then recognized she could cope with that adversity. She politely pointed out the exaggeration, suggested adjustments. Though the boss frowned, ultimately the ad was toned down. That small stand emboldened her further. Now, in the days ahead, she wants to systematically fortify her resolve so that the next moral challenge, big or small, finds her prepared. This final segment will show exactly how individuals like Eleanor, and indeed anyone, can embed Stoic ethics into their daily decisions, forging a habit of moral steadfastness that outlasts fleeting illusions. Weaving Stoic ethics into daily life 1. Morning grounding, the purposeful start. The Stoics often mention starting each day with a reflective moment, sometimes in bed before rising. You might visualize not just practical duties, like a meeting or a project, but moral challenges. Maybe a coworker pressing you to disregard a standard, or a friend urging you to join petty gossip. By labeling these potential dilemmas in advance, you erode the element of surprise, which illusions often exploit. If you imagine your boss pressuring you to distort data, you mentally rehearse calmly refusing, mindful that while it might strain the relationship, you can adapt. This mental run-through is short but potent, just a minute or two, ensuring that illusions like "I must comply or my world ends" don't fester unseen. During this morning ritual, it's also beneficial to reaffirm your overarching moral lines, like "I will not lie to clients," or "I won't let fear of social disapproval force me into complicity." You speak them silently, setting the day's moral posture. It's not unlike how an athlete stretches and visualizes performance before a game. Here, your game is moral living. The stretch is your Stoic reflection, loosening illusions that might otherwise snag you. This grounding can significantly reduce the sense of ambush when real ethical tests appear. 2. The day's encounters, recognizing the moment of choice. As you navigate the day, illusions frequently reassert themselves in small ways. Stoics advise staying alert. For instance, if a coworker starts gossiping maliciously about someone absent, you might sense the social pull to laugh along or add more fuel. The illusions might whisper, "It's harmless banter," or "I have no choice but to blend in." A Stoic mind notices that moment. Heart rate might spike, you sense a twinge of unease. Instead of caving, you recall your vow of honesty or kindness. Perhaps you change the subject or politely excuse yourself. This might be a small stand, but it cements your moral reflex. Over time, these small stands shape your default response to bigger dilemmas. In more critical junctures, like an explicit request to manipulate data, you might excuse yourself briefly to gather your composure. Stoic negative visualization might come into play. Yes, if I refuse, the boss might threaten me, but I can endure that consequence. If I comply, I wound my sense of truthfulness. Freed from illusions that compliance is the only route to keep your job or your calm, you pick the moral path. Of course, if consequences do follow, you rely on Stoic acceptance, reminding yourself that losing illusions is the price of integrity. You remain at peace knowing your moral identity stands unblemished. 3. Midday. Check and adapting on the fly. A midday check might be as simple as pausing, maybe over lunch or a short break, to ask, "Have I faced any moral forks so far? Did illusions sway me?" If you realize you succumbed to a minor compromise, like endorsing a half-truth, this moment of realization helps you correct course swiftly. Perhaps you decide to clarify that half-truth with the relevant parties, or to be more vigilant in the afternoon. This Stoic readiness fosters a kind of moral agility. You address lapses soon after they occur, preventing them from snowballing into bigger entanglements. Let me share an example from a colleague of mine. She adopted a practice of writing 3 bullet points at lunchtime about her morning's moral climate. Times she felt aligned with her values, times she felt illusions creeping in, and a quick plan for the afternoon. This mini reflection took only a minute, but sharpened her Stoic attention for the rest of the workday. She reported that illusions like, "I must keep silent about minor unethical issues," or "It's not my place to speak up," lost their hold when she confronted them in writing. Over weeks, she found herself becoming that quietly reliable voice of ethics in her team, ironically earning genuine respect, not scorn. The evening reflection, a safe space for honesty. Stoics like Seneca frequently recommended an evening review, a time to mentally replay the day's events. This is the stage where illusions get dissected under the calm scrutiny of hindsight. You might ask, which moral dilemmas popped up? Did I yield to illusions that told me I had no choice or that it was trivial? Did I remain faithful to my vow of honesty? If I faltered, what triggered that slip? The tone of this reflection is not self-flagellation, but learning. If illusions led you astray, you note how. Perhaps a small fear overshadowed your vow, or you believed a convenience excuse. Then you imagine how you could handle a similar scenario next time, reinforcing Stoic clarity. This daily accountability ensures illusions can't hide indefinitely. In modern life, we're so overscheduled that evening reflection might feel like a luxury. But even a few minutes lying in bed before sleep can suffice. The Stoic tradition calls it a daily moral inventory. Over time, it accumulates moral muscle memory. If illusions once had an easy time deceiving you, now they face a watchful mind that dissects each day's moral patterns and corrects them. This approach fosters a sense of steady improvement, like a craftsman refining technique each night so the next day's craftsmanship improves. Transcending guilt and self-doubt. A crucial aspect of Stoic integration is learning to handle guilt or self-doubt if you do compromise. Sometimes illusions might be so strong that you fail a moral test. The Stoics counsel, do not cling to that guilt, using it as an excuse for further moral decline. Instead, harness it as impetus to realign. Epictetus taught that once you see the wrongdoing clearly, you step back to your vow and vow to do better. You might also use negative visualization in a post-event manner, imagining how the compromise could lead to bigger ramifications, or how life might look if you keep sliding. That mental shock can awaken your deeper resolve. Imagine a scenario. You find out you've quietly taken part in a manipulation at work, maybe forging a small signature on someone's behalf. You feel uneasy. A Stoic approach says, yes, I stumbled. Now let me see illusions that caused it. Perhaps I believed I had no choice. I see that was false. Next time, I won't yield so easily. You might also rectify the slip if possible, disclosing the act or ensuring it won't repeat. By confronting illusions, you break the pattern of hush or denial that entrenches wrongdoing. Freed from illusions that you're doomed once you slip, you recenter on Stoic virtue. That pattern fosters renewal rather than deeper moral cynicism, preparing for serious dilemmas with negative visualization. Beyond the day-to-day reflection, Stoics recommend occasionally focusing a negative visualization session specifically on a major moral dilemma you suspect might loom on the horizon. Perhaps you see your firm drifting into unethical territory, or you sense tension in a close relationship that might lead to you being asked to lie or conceal. For that session, you fully conjure the scenario. You're asked to break a law or to do something that violates a vow. Then you map out the cost of refusal, maybe loss of income or conflict with a loved one. By mentally grappling with that cost, you accept it, seeing how you'd adapt. That acceptance defangs illusions of, "I can't endure that price." Freed from that illusion, if or when the scenario arises, you respond with a calm, moral no, having prepared yourself psychologically. This approach might remind you of a soldier training for battle, or an athlete training for a tough match. It's precisely the Stoic method. By anticipating adversity, here moral adversity, you reduce the element of shock and maintain presence of mind. Let me mention that some also find it helpful to role-play with a trusted confidant. Pretend you're my boss telling me to fudge data. I'll practice how I respond. Doing so might feel a bit theatrical, but it cements your Stoic readiness. You realize illusions that you cannot face confrontation, or that I have no alternative, are illusions indeed. Your reason stands ready. Handling real consequences if a crisis hits now. If the worst truly happens, like your moral stand leading to job loss or your refusal to lie prompting a painful break with someone you cherished, Stoic acceptance is key. You remind yourself that illusions would claim this is intolerable. But Stoic logic says, I recognized this might happen. I do not relish it, but I remain intact. Then you pivot to constructive adaptation. If unemployed, you set about searching for new roles, possibly tightening your belt financially. If spurned by a once close friend or partner, you manage heartbreak but hold to your vow of sincerity. The Stoics never insisted it'd be painless. They insisted you'd remain free from self-betrayal or crippling despair. Because illusions, not adversity itself, breed the worst torment. If illusions go, adversity can be faced with a dignity that fosters rebirth. Consider a real-life parallel, a whistleblower who's fired and blacklisted. That person might grieve the lost career path, but also find some organizations or individuals who admire honesty, opening new doors. Even if that admiration isn't universal, the Stoic stance sees that living with a clear conscience outweighs universal approval. Freed from illusions that success or acceptance must be won at any cost, the whistleblower can endure the lonely aftermath, eventually forging a new path with moral fortitude as their guiding star. Compassion for others. While maintaining your stance, Stoic moral clarity never demands we become harsh or self-righteous. People may yield to illusions out of genuine fear or ignorance. The Stoics recognized that your refusal to compromise might even help them see an alternative. If a coworker is petrified about losing a bonus if they don't cheat, your Stoic stance might inspire them, or at least sow a seed of doubt about illusions. On the other hand, if they remain entrenched, you neither scorn them nor mimic them. You do what you can without illusions of controlling their moral journey. This attitude fosters a certain quiet leadership. You become a beacon of possibility for those uncertain if moral stands can be lived out in the real world. Integrating Stoic resilience with empathy. We must also consider how Stoics handle moral dilemmas that revolve around empathy. like whether to help someone at personal cost. Sometimes illusions say, "I can't spare the resources," or "I have to look out for myself alone." Stoics remind us that humans are social creatures meant to assist one another in times of need. So illusions might hinder compassion. If your friend begs for help, illusions might claim you can't risk stepping in. A Stoic approach clarifies that yes, stepping in might cost you time or comfort, but if your moral sense aligns with aiding them, you accept the cost. Freed from illusions that you must preserve your comfort above all, you do the right thing. This synergy is important. Stoic integrity often fosters generosity, because illusions that you can't afford generosity or should never inconvenience yourself are unmasked. Consider someone who refuses to donate or volunteer out of illusions that they're too financially tight or time-strapped. A Stoic check might reveal they can reduce trivial luxuries or reorder their schedule. The illusions that they must preserve every moment or dollar for their own comfort evaporate, letting them act compassionately without guilt. Indeed, Stoics in ancient times, like Seneca, often wrote about the duty to share resources if it doesn't compromise your fundamental virtue. That sense of moral solidarity persists in modern Stoic thinking. You help where you can, accepting that your personal benefits are second to the principle of generosity, so long as it doesn't clash with your moral center. Sustaining the Stoic mindset over time. None of this is a quick fix. Stoicism sees moral fortitude as a lifelong discipline. Each day's minor or major dilemmas reinforce or undermine your character. So, if illusions trip you up frequently, you keep at the reflection, noticing patterns. Over months or years, your Stoic reflex to uphold integrity grows more automatic, akin to building muscle through repeated exercise. Meanwhile, illusions lose their potency, recognized swiftly as old mental habits. That's why daily or weekly reflection matters. It ensures illusions can't reassert themselves unchallenged. We can illustrate with the metaphor of a sculptor shaping marble. Each moral choice is a chisel strike, gradually revealing the figure within. Illusions are lumps or cracks in the stone. The Stoic method chips away illusions day by day until your character emerges more clearly, an image of consistent virtue. You might never perfect it, but the difference from your starting point is enormous. You'll see that your moral stances are less prone to crisis, your sense of identity stronger, and your capacity to handle moral adversity calmer. Conclusion: a living ethic for modern moral dilemmas. In bringing this video to its conclusion, let me gather the threads. Stoicism contends that true fulfillment depends on preserving your moral core, even if worldly success, comfort, or acceptance wavers. Modern moral dilemmas, be they subtle daily corners cut or large-scale unethical demands, test whether illusions, fear of losing externals, minimizing small wrongs, will rule us, or whether reason and conscience will prevail. By adopting negative visualization, we face adversity mentally, dissolving illusions that adversity is unendurable. By practicing daily reflection, we catch illusions in small forms before they escalate. By anchoring our identity in virtue rather than ephemeral achievements, we realize we can adapt to adversity without forfeiting our soul. This Stoic approach, ironically, often fosters intangible rewards. Trust from peers who admire your consistency, a deep internal peace that illusions can't grant, and sometimes even success in unexpected ways, though Stoics never guarantee that outcome. The real reward is the unwavering knowledge that, come what may, job loss, betrayal, social backlash, you did not surrender your integrity. That knowledge is priceless, the reason Stoics hold moral principle as the only true good. In everyday life, from your morning vow to remain honest, to your midday check for illusions, to your evening reflection on ethical choices, Stoic ethics is not complicated, but it demands perseverance. You might slip. Illusions are sly. A friend says, just this once, do the quick, unethical workaround. No one cares. Part of you might yield. Yet each time you stand firm, illusions lose ground. Over time, illusions no longer hold you hostage. You become the kind of individual who, though facing uncertain outcomes, never sells out his moral stance. Finally, let me remark that Stoicism doesn't promise a pain-free path. You may indeed face friction, heartbreak, or adversity in living by your values. But Stoics maintain that a conscience unpolluted by illusions yields a deeper form of peace. You might forfeit certain fleeting gains, but you gain a life unburdened by guilt or shame. In a world rife with moral compromise, your Stoic posture sets you apart, not as a self-righteous judge of others, but as someone who, by quiet example, proves that integrity isn't naive. It is, in fact, the most grounded, rational way to navigate life's moral complexities. With that, we have reached the end of our exploration. We began by seeing how Stoicism elevates moral principle beyond ephemeral success, traveled through illusions that sabotage moral clarity, and arrived at a blueprint for daily living. Morning reflection, midday checks, and evening reviews, bolstered by negative visualization. If you adopt these methods, you may find yourself less anxious about potential backlash or failure, more equipped to handle moral forks, and more at peace in the knowledge that no external force can truly taint your conscience if you stand by it. That is Stoicism's promise for modern moral dilemmas. Unwavering integrity in a world of swirling pressures, illusions cast aside, clarity shining in their stead. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.